living Bankside and all of you for these hustings in preparation for the local elections, which is just a week away. And I'm sorry I politics at all in this place, or that thinking that clergy should. We very much here believe in speaking truth to power when needs be, and those who come here know that I hope to be true. But this is support to all of those who are standing in any kind of way, because public service is something that is absolutely critical to our democracy. So thank you to those who are willing to stand and to put themselves up to the electorate, and also to explain their policies. Amir, all the best. On the moment, but welcome to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Citizenship Coordinator with Living Bankside, and on behalf of everyone we want to wish you a very warm welcome to this event area. And our last one was the London Mayor election. And on the screen. It's been and Living Bankside has been no different. We've been heavily involved with supporting the vulnerable and the elderly over the pandemic, with food parcels and packages, digital inclusion, and now we're looking forward to bringing events like these. Housekeeping before we begin. The toilets are on just outside the door. Men's on the left, women's just up the stairs. The exit is also the same way you came in. In case of emergency, there's also an exit on the left. Please keep your phones on silent to avoid disrupting the debate as much as the event is being live streamed. And lastly, I appreciate some of you may be trying to avoid social distancing, but if you can, it'd be lovely to have you all sort of shuffle to the front a bit more. And with that, I'll hand over to Amir to start the debate. Thank you.
Let me just check. Okay, this is ready. Excellent. Thank you. Just to add to that, firstly, I'd just like to say thanks to the Cathedral for once again hosting this or hustling to the debate. It's really important to promote democracy in local elections, so it's wonderful to have these events and to hear people speak and put questions. I am fasting, so I will be breaking my fast during. That would be appreciated, it's just one thing. And then the other thing is just to say, so yes, the debate has been live streamed, and I welcome you to this event, and I'd like to welcome the candidates. So we have with us Claire, Councillor Williams, who's the Labour Party, and Councillor Hamish from the Lib Dems. So we're going to start now.
All right, point of order. There are other people here who are leaders of political parties in Southwark. There's other people here who are leaders of political people who think they can rule you with forward. We stand for accountability and democracy, and we say we should be on there joining this debate. And if you don't believe in democracy, I know you won't allow it. But that is an utter disgrace.
There's no time.
There might be people who don't want to hear, but this is a democratic debate. You understand that? That's what England is founded upon. Well, you explain away. I may come back.
So in every hustings that we've hosted, we have a policy, because of the fact that a lot of time to have all of the candidates lists, all of the different parties represented.
You've got 2 more here, they could do it.
We had.
You've got the time, don't bullshit.
We had emails from 12 different parties.
Their party and other people aren't allowed to speak.
If I may, we had 12 different individuals who emailed us, in addition to the 3 that are here today, to be on the panel. Unfortunately, we don't have all of those people. If I were to allow one additional party, how are we going to have a debate with
You've got 2 more here. You've got the SDP here, and you've got Let London Live.
If I may finish, please.
And who did the Green Party represent anyway for the conference?
If I may finish, please. So the policy that we have had with all of our debates, if you look back into all of our debates, you will see that the people that have been represented on the panel have been those who have elected members, who are the councillors. That has always been our policy. It is our debate.
Well, it's a closed club, isn't it?
Well,
That's why you have that policy. Pathetic.
If you want to.
How does politics ever change? Look, why is there so few people here?
If you would like to
Pathetic, pathetic, pathetic.
If you'd like.
Hello, so I'm Kieran Williams, leader of Southwark Labour Group, and thanks for hosting this husband. I want to set out our Labour positive vision for this borough. Southwark's an amazing place. We have incredible institutions, amazing world-leading universities and hospitals, businesses that do everything, cultural institutions of all kinds, and above all, amazing people drawn from around the world. But I know, we all know, that right now, our community are facing a really hard time. The last few years have been incredibly difficult because of the pandemic, but above and beyond that, we're facing a cost of living crisis caused in Westminster. We're living in a time when we've had 2/3 of the budget for our council services cut back by successive Liberal Democrat and Conservative governments. And we've got residents who are increasingly being forced to go to food banks across our country and in our borough. And they're the things that I'm determined that we continue to challenge and change in Southwark. I ask you to vote for us based on the record that we have. During the last few years, during this pandemic, as a Labour administration, we've stepped up to support people through the pandemic. We got help to 73,000 people who were vulnerable, isolated, and needed our help, working with our community to do that. And I assure you, councils of other political colours stopped that support after the first few months. We continued it throughout the pandemic. When nationally the government promised laptops for our school children and failed to provide them, in Southwark we got them to them, 1,700 for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. When we needed to provide school meals in the holidays for children who didn't have them, Southwark Labour stepped in and provided them when the government did not. We've got over £250 million out of support out to local businesses to protect jobs during this pandemic, making a real difference to people's lives. But it's not just the pandemic we've delivered on. We've made a real difference as a Labour administration over the last 4 years on the things we promised at the last election. We supported over 5,000 people into jobs in our borough, started building on-site 2,500 council homes, which will transform the lives of families who move into them and many more people to come.
Yeah, how many
We've got our schools up to 95% being good or outstanding, and in Southwark, Labour has created more green flag parks, now 22 more than tripling the number in our borough. As well as opening 5 new libraries, halving the council's carbon emissions, planting 10,000 trees, creating 2,000 apprenticeships. I could go on. We've done all of that whilst keeping your council tax the 8th lowest in London. I want to briefly contrast that with the other parties, and then I'll come back to the things that matter to us in Southwark. Labour took over our council 10 years ago now. At that point, it was a Liberal Democrat and Conservative coalition. The Audit Commission had rated it the worst run council in the country, the 3rd worst council tax collection rate, the 6th worst recycling rate, the 8th worst adult social care, hardly half of our homes meeting the decent home standards. Those are the things we've reversed. Now we've got one of the best council tax collection rates, We've got one of the best recycling rates in inner London. But I'm interested in the future and what we'll deliver for you. Our manifesto, and we are the only party that sets out a full manifesto for our borough, sets out our commitment to create more good jobs, 2,000 more apprenticeships, 2,000 green jobs, a new investment programme in our high streets. To make our borough greener for everyone, that means creating more parks like the one at Elephant Park and the new one to come at Canada Water. Planting more trees, 1,000 more EV charging points, doubling the number of cycle hangers again in the borough, and halving the council's carbon emissions again, done it once, halving it again over the next 4 years. We'll make our borough safer, investing in a £2 million anti-social behaviour task force, upgrading streetlights across the whole borough with LEDs so they save energy and make our streets safer. Launch a campaign to tackle misogyny and improve CCTV. We'll build more homes, 2,500 council homes we have on site. We'll get another 1,000 on site over the next 4 years. 500 more homes for key workers. And we'll get support to people that they need, launching a new cost of living fund. Rolling out mental health support for all our young people. I'm delighted to say we've launched an open access service in Peckham already. And providing support for all unpaid carers. There's so much more. This is practical action. A Labour Council that will be on your side, delivering a fairer, greener and safer Southwark. Thank you.
Well, before I begin, I want to thank you, Mayor and Alex and the whole team here at Bankside and here at Southwark for putting on the hustings this evening and for all that you do in the community along with all of the other wonderful groups here at Southwark. It's my real privilege to be sitting here as the leader of the Liberal Democrats here in Southwark. I'm a councillor just down the river in Bermondsey, and I've been leader of the opposition group in Southwark Council for a little over a year now. And I'm really proud to be putting forward a positive, bold, liberal vision for our borough in these elections. Because this election is really important, isn't it? It's a critical time for Southwark, for London and for our country. As we deal with the aftermath of Brexit, as we tackle the long-term effects of the pandemic, as we participate in our moral duty to respond to the events abroad, particularly Ukraine, at the moment. And as we tackle some of the bigger issues facing us here at home, in particular, the climate emergency and the housing crisis. And I'm excited by what the Lib Dems have to offer in this election. Big plans to address our housing issues, to accelerate council house building in the borough, demanding more from our private developers, to get empty homes and council homes back into use, to provide the housing that so many local families desperately need. And on climate change, I'm really proud to be standing on a platform to protect the green spaces that we have in our borough, to plant new trees, to deliver the infrastructure that we need in order to meet our climate targets. But as I go around Southwark during this campaign and speak to residents in every corner of our borough, I hear the same thing time and time again. People are fed up. They're fed up with politicians and they're fed up with this council. They think that the Conservative government is taking them for fools, and they think that the council is ignoring them. And it's no surprise, is it? Because the council has, over the last decade or so, practically stopped consulting meaningfully on anything. It's not listening to people when they raise issues in their communities. It's certainly not responding when they raise complaints and concerns. And it's not delivering on those bigger issues. On housing, for example, our situation is getting worse. The Labour administration, since they took control of the council a decade ago, they sold or demolished over 3,000 50,000 council homes.
Yes,
And in the last
great.
4 years, they've only managed to build 160. That's a terrible record. And the leader of the council has called to stand here and suggest that this council is doing wonders. It's not. This council is letting us down. The Labour council is letting down people of Southwark day in, day out, on these big issues which matter so much to our borough today and matter so much to future generations here in Southwark. On climate, I was so proud 3 years ago that we unanimously voted to declare a climate emergency, and okay, absolutely right, we should have done it earlier, but I was proud at least that we were doing it then. But it's been so frustrating to then watch for the 3 years since as the Labour administration basically did nothing about it. They spent 2.5 years writing a strategy and action plan, which was roundly criticised when it was published because it didn't contain a plan. It's just not good enough, and it's not even for want of for a lack of money. A year ago, they set aside £25 million to tackle the climate emergency. Well, a year later, we asked them what they spent it on, and they said nothing. They hadn't spent a penny. It's just not acceptable. It's just not good enough. And their failures cut across so many core services as well. A massive cut in youth services. It used to be, when we went around the council, about £5 million a year budget for youth services here in Southwark. It's now about £1 million. Cuts for street cleaning, cuts for community wardens. It's a terrible record of failure. And look, I look forward to going into more detail about our policies and our plans during the course of this evening, and I look forward to answering your questions. But, my gosh, the Labour leader of the council has to be honest about his failings, and he has to have a plan to fix them. But at the moment, he doesn't.
Okay, so we're going to take the first question. Is Rose here? Rose McCann? Yes? Alex, do you have the microphone? Yes.
Hi there.
No.
Hi there, my name is Rose. I'm a Southwark resident and work here as well, and I'm part of Southwark Cyclists. To tackle the climate crisis and achieve net zero, we need to dramatically reduce traffic pollution in our borough and make it much easier for people to cycle or walk. Easier and safer. If you're elected, what will you do to achieve this?
So we have a number of questions on this very important topic, obviously climate, and obviously the speakers have mentioned it in their introductions. So I'm going to try and go through those as we, after they respond to that first bit of the question. So I'll start with Claire.
Well, I mean, there's a huge amount that we could be doing. I think, first of all, we have to make it much easier for people to not use car journeys, except in, definitely. We also need to be really encouraging them out of their cars, because, and I would do this in the combination of both characteristics. First of all, we need to be giving all new buildings, all new road projects really need to be giving absolute priority to active travel, so to walking and cycling, and not have it as an afterthought, which currently seems to be the case in Southwark. The other part of Roundabout, for example, where very close to where I live, has been its rebuilding has been great, but it's left cyclists and pedestrians to basically share their space. I would like to see a transport policy where we give priority to cyclists and people walking. I would also like to see a massive reduction in the number of car spaces available. I would like to see council encouraging people from moving from car ownership to car usership, so when they do actually need to use cars, and some people really do need to use motor vehicles, they will be doing it in a sharing way rather than having a car that's taking up space on the road. I would also like to see, well, if the Greens do get onto the council, a much bigger investment in cycle storage. I think the Labour's current plan is to deliver 600 cycle storage bays for Southwark. To put that in context, that's about 1 for every 100 residents, and that is their aim, and we don't think it's good enough. I can think of 100 people in about 4 streets where I live who need cycle hangers, and I don't know if anyone uses social media recently, regularly, but recently there have been some, unbearably hilarious pictures of people keeping their bicycles on their balconies, in their bathrooms. I keep mine in my hallway. I have to carry it up 2 flights of stairs. It doesn't encourage me to cycle, although I'm a passionate cyclist. We also, I would really like to see greater education for motorists as well. One of the reasons that cycling in Southwark is frankly terrifying sometimes is because I think a lot of motorists don't have a big enough appreciation for experiences with cyclists. So I would like to see, hopefully like to see that too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the question. It's a really important question, isn't it? How we use our kind of means of transport to tackle the climate emergency and cycling in particular. So first of all, I think I'd say on a slightly wider level, I think if we want to reduce car use, we have to make it easy for people to use alternative forms of transport. And we absolutely need to be delivering a better infrastructure for our public transport. And that's why it's so disappointing that over the last 5 years or so, we've seen the Labour Mayor shelve the plans for a footbridge between Rotherhithe and Canary Wharf, shelve the plans for an extension to the Bakerloo line down the old Kent Road, cut the RV1 bus, which is of course a fantastic environmental bus as well, in this very community. And now is cutting bus services elsewhere in the borough too. That's not the ambition that we should have for our transport. And of course, it's not going to be easy for people to give up cars if there is no alternative. So the Lib Dems on public transport more widely in this election are throwing our support behind proposals to deliver a tram to Southwark, a much cheaper and quicker proposal than Bakerloo line, so we'll continue to support that as a long-term addition to our transport infrastructure. And on cycling in particular, I think there's so much more that we can and should be doing. So in our manifesto, we're committed to building 25 kilometres of additional safe cycle lanes in our borough to ensure that people can cycle around in safety and without fear. But we also need to make sure that people are able to either own bikes or use bikes easily. Claire's spoke already about current ambitions, or lack of ambitions, I suppose, in the council about cycle storage. Well, just to add to what Claire said, in fact, there's currently a waiting list at Southwark Council of 80,000 local people who are desperate for secure cycle storage in this borough. Labour's manifesto in this election wouldn't deliver that capacity. There's no ambition here to address the issue. And while we're on it, I also want to see us extend the cycle hire scheme, so that the bike you can rent by the hour, essentially. If you look at a map of the cycle scheme around London, there is a great big Southwark-sized hole in the middle of it. So it's something that I campaigned for throughout my time as councillor. I'm glad to see that we finally have a little bit of an extension to Bermondsey, but there's still a huge amount of our borough that isn't served. So again, in our manifesto, we're committed to rolling out docking stations to the middle and the south of the borough to enable people to use that on the site.
Thank you, Rose. Again, this is a really important issue. So, as many will know, the biggest cause of carbon emissions in our secondary, of course, carbon emissions in our borough is transport. But we have hundreds of people who die on our roads and on our streets and in our communities as a result of air quality every year. And we have road traffic accidents that we need to reduce. And so our manifesto set out a full plan to look at everything we need to do to change that. So that starts with public transport. And I do have to take issue with Hamish on this. The reason we've seen plans for public transport paused in our city is because the Conservative government have pushed through reductions to transport for London's funding. I think the Conservatives are not here, and no surprise there.
Now they want to come 4 years ago.
And that's a difference that's having a real impact on people in our borough. I'm delighted to say that we've had public transport improve. The whole affair has transformed lives for many in our community who are struggling to pay to get to work, or the bus fare to get you to work. But as a Labour Council, we've committed to improve public transport further, working to make all of our train stations accessible across the borough. So we invest in a new Northern Line entrance at Elephant Castle, where it's overcrowded, bringing £60 million, again, to make public transport really accessible to people. We will keep pushing for a Baker Blue Line extension because it is the right long-term answer, not just for Southwark, but for the whole of London's public transport. I mean, the government recognises that that's the case in order to deliver it, but we will push hard for it. And we'll change our streets. Over the last 2 years alone, we've already doubled the number of cycle lanes we have, and we said we'll double that number again, taking it 4 times where it was just a few years ago. We've rolled out 13 kilometres of segregated cycle lanes in the borough over the last 2 years, and completely changed many of our neighbourhoods to make them easier to walk and cycle, and now we're working with communities to make sure those changes are right and work for people in their areas. In addition, we're looking at the things that will make a difference working with our schools and with employers to make sure that they are helping people travel in sustainable ways too. And we said that we will improve air quality specifically around our schools, introducing more school streets. We've rolled out 39 of them across the borough. That's where the roads outside the school are closed at school pick-up and drop-off time. They've seen transformation in the number of people children who are travelling to school by either walking or on scooters or cycling. Our manifesto sets out even more than that, a full plan to look at all the things we need to do to change streets. And for me, it's about creating livable places, where it's a nice place to live, where it's enjoyable, where you see your friends as you travel around. It's about making neighbourhoods that really work for people, so you can get to the facilities near you. And it's about those fundamental differences, saving lives on air quality, reducing carbon emissions, preventing road traffic accidents.
Thank you. I'm going to take some questions from the audience and then also the other questions that we have in plan, and they're slightly different, so we'll add that in. I just want to add, before I take some questions from the audience, just a tangential question / point, from the research that we've seen, your thoughts really on idling and the problems that it causes, and what can we do to sort of tackle that. I think in America they have some software or something in place to really try and tackle that. Obviously that has massive effects on people's lungs, especially in children, so it'd be good to know what the council could do and what you would do if you were to lead them. But I'll take some questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions about that? This lady, just on the back there, please.
Hello.
Just state your name, please.
It's Deborah Benjamin. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I've actually come here tonight to present a petition to Councillor Williams on behalf of my housing association, the flats, the colonies. Councillor Williams knows me well. In April 2020, Councillor Williams said he would help us, or help me, to deal with an electrical disrepair issue. It took probably about a year and a half to fully diagnose what the problem was, and the problem is a non-functioning or problematic lightning protection system. Does anyone know about that? Has anyone heard about that?
Sorry, can I just ask, is your question about climate? I mean, if you do have a sense...
It is about environmental issues,
okay,
because this affects the environmental issues we look at. Okay,
I was just going to say, I fully appreciate that you want to give the context, but if you could get to the question and then so we can get the answers. I understand that you want to give the context, but if we could get to the question, that would be great.
Okay, sure. So the issue is real. It has been tested professionally by electricians and an EMF surveyor. So Councillor Williams and my housing association, Peabody, has had these details for about a year now and not done anything. This is a health and safety and fire risk issue. So about 2 years ago, I asked Councillor Williams what Southwark Council's policy was regarding enforcing health and safety issues for housing associations. I've asked him twice. He has not replied. I now ask you again, because our building has not passed its fire safety check. It has not, it cannot pass it with these electrical issues. We have children in the block.
Okay.
We have 30 flats. What are you going to do about it? And also, can I give this to you, please? So this is on behalf of most of our residents.
Thank you for your question. If you could pass the petition on later on, if that's okay, please. So we'll carry on with the debate.
Walk up there right now.
That's fine.
Well, answer the question now. Come on, what's going on? Is this a debate or not? Yeah, good one. We want accountability here.
If you could pass the microphone back to Alex, please. Thank you. We're going to take some more questions and then we'll ask the candidates to answer each of those that are being presented if that's okay. Can I take the gentleman there in the colour-blind yellow-ish jacket?
Thank you. I'll be short and sweet. I just want to revert back to what was said about trees, 10,500 trees. I will admit there have been a lot of trees. I live in the Royal Southwark area. There have been a lot of trees planted. I plant that on the quick sometimes to meet the numbers. But I've lived in Royal and the area for 70 years. And in the last decade, say 15 years, I've seen an unbelievable amount of large canopy trees, not whips or standards, cut down in my area.
Shame.
I've got videos, you've seen that, I've got more than you, I've done it for many years. I want to know from the panel what they know about how many trees have been lost, rather than large canopy trees, rather than the ones that have been put in over the last 18 months or so.
It's for 5G. That's what they're doing. It's a disgrace. An utter disgrace.
Okay, so we're going to take some...
They're fake green.
We're going to take
all
some,
of them.
We're going to get some answers, responses from the candidates, and then we'll come back to you. If I can start with...
Yes. Well, I'll go in reverse order. So Steve, to start with your question, I understand the answer is 7,000. Since Labour took charge of Southwark Council, they've cut down 7,000 trees, almost all of which obviously are mature trees with a proper canopy cover that provide great environmental benefits. And yes, they have planted in the last few years. You can say 10,000 now, wonderful, but of course they're baby trees, if you like. They're not providing at the moment the same environmental benefits as trees that we have amongst. So in terms of canopy cover, we are far back from where we were when they took charge 10 years ago. But when it comes to trees, the issue isn't just about planting them, it's also about maintaining them. And what's increasingly of concern is that it seems that the new trees which are being planted by the council are then not being properly looked after. So they're not being watered as much as they should be, they're not being cared for as much as they should be. And so new trees which the council is investing in, which are being planted, are then getting ill and they're dying. And that's just a pointless waste of money and effort. And the council needs to be much better that full array of responsibility when it comes to looking after our trees. So that we shouldn't be cutting down mature trees, and when we are planting new trees, we should be making sure that they can thrive. Deborah, I can't answer your question in detail because I don't know even what the council's policy is on health and safety in housing association property, but I'm looking forward to hearing the answer from Kieran, who I hope will do. And just to say, I don't know the people policy as well, but I know the challenges that sometimes present. So you have my sympathies, and I'd be really happy to talk with you afterwards if you would like. And Amir, to answer your question, why do? Yes, it's a real issue. It's a big issue in my ward as well. I suspect similar reasons it is in this neighbourhood with early morning deliveries and the like. Well, my understanding is that the council does have legal powers to fine motorists who are idling, so lorries that leave the engine running while doing a delivery or the like. And I think, like you say, as a that the council has never issued a single penalty notice to idlers. Having to be corrected if that's wrong, but my understanding is that it's zero. And so there's a huge amount that the council can be doing to tackle the issue of idling, and well, it's not.
Firstly, I'm very happy to talk to you afterwards. We talked at great length last year when you rang me up, and I think we had a couple of long telephone conversations about the situation then. I'm very happy to talk to you again. I don't think you've been in contact every 3 weeks, but I'd be very happy to follow up. So let's talk at the end. Housing associations obviously should all keep their homes in good condition, and I would expect you to do the same. I'm very happy to introduce you that we've now got presented to me today. On trees, our commitment is to increase the number of trees in the borough. So I'm very proud to say right now, Southwark has more trees than any other in a London borough. We've got about 80,000 trees across our whole borough. It's right to say, with 80,000 trees, that every year some of them die. And you'd expect them to be, that's perhaps on average something about 100 years, about 800 trees every year.
One of you, somebody is knocking the microphone.
Where is the roving microphone? Okay.
And it's just stopping us being able to hear you properly.
Yeah. They stop now.
I'll try again. Apologies if you missed that. But yeah, so we've got about 80,000 trees, the largest number of any in a London borough. You'd expect, of course, every year some of those to die. Nobody actually lives probably less than 100 years on average for a tree. And so we do, of course, have to cut some of them down each year to keep them safe. And we have, across the country, tragic incidents where trees have fallen on people, and it's really important that we don't allow that to happen. However, now we are investing in planting many more. So as I say, we made a commitment just 2 years ago to plant another 10,000 trees, and I'm delighted to say actually we've gone beyond that commitment and got that to just under 15,000 in fact planted over the last 2 years. And in our manifesto we set out a commitment to plant another 20,000 across the whole borough, taking us to well over 100,000. And our manifesto commitment is to increase the tree canopy cover as well. Of course, caring for those trees is really important, so all of the trees we plant come with a service to water them on a regular basis, and you'll see them being watered now as the ones that were planted over the winter. But trees are just one part of our response on nature. We've created 18 new nature conservation sites across the borough over the last few months, making sure they're protected. We're delivering new parks and open spaces, and it's fantastic to see the new park at Elephant in progress, not fully built, but not fully finished, but looking great. We'll have a new one at Canada Water as well, and we've created smaller ones like Bankside Nature Garden, and upgraded our parks incredibly. And those who remember how Burgess Park looked 10 years ago, when the Labour administration took over the council, at that point it was full of burnt out cars and really not a nice place to go. It's now completely transformed. You'll see the same with Dickens fields as well now, a transformed park. That's our investment in nature across the whole borough. Our nature action plan has received national attention for its success in being exactly how authority should improve nature in their area, and we're committed to going much, much further than that over the next 2 years.
Sorry, you haven't answered my question. What's your policy regarding enforcement by health and safety?
council has enforcement powers on all of private landlords, including housing associations. I don't know the full details, because it doesn't happen to me, but I'm very happy to look at it.
I'm sure you know the details. You know our building has not passed its health and safety, its fire risk. You know that. So what are you going to do about it?
Okay, I think I've got to move on, if that's okay. I think Kieran's answered the question.
No.
I think Kieran's answered the question.
And to be clear, that information I didn't know until you just told me, so I'm very happy to talk to you at the end around the marriage assessment and what we can help you with. Your landlord.
Thank you. Can we go to Claire now, please?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, again, I'm afraid I don't know an awful lot about the borough's responsibility for health and safety in housing associations, but it does sound that it sounds like the local council maybe hasn't really been listening to residents, which is unfortunately quite typical for the local council. I mean, in my ward, we've had certain implementing plans on the local council estate. Nearly 98% of residents signed a petition against it, which was ruled by the local council. It is unfortunately an indictment of the current council's engagement with residents. And regarding, and again, I'm very interested in talking to you about your shows as well. In regarding the tree canopy, I can't really add very much more than what Hayden said, but again, I do think it's it's a pattern of waste from the Labour Council, which a number of these trees have been lost during demolitions and rebuilding of council houses, where perfectly good resources have been destroyed wastefully for quite sort of short-term financial gain, and often Labour seem to be much more concerned with the numbers than they really are with the actual outcomes. I'm so sorry, I forgot the last question. I do apologise.
My question was just about idling.
Idling, yes. Well, again, I mean, we get idlers in our street. It's very damaging to the environment. I think, and the council obviously are not using their powers to prosecute these people, or to prosecute these people, to find these people. I also think that there's just not enough awareness that one of the residents that it is actually legal, and that you should be able to contact your council. I didn't know this until quite recently, until somebody pointed out to me. And then I tried to call the council, and surprisingly enough, I couldn't get through. I think there's quite a lot that we can do there, both sort of, first of all, actually issuing fines, and also making the council available to understand that this is happening.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question on planning, and then we're going to move on to the next topic. There's a lady just over there, please. Sorry, it's just a lady that would have hand up first.
Yes, I'm concerned that Southwark hasn't declared an ecology crisis alongside the climate crisis. The two are inextricably linked. The ecology has a lot of the answers to the climate crisis. Yes, we have a wonderful Southwark Nature Action Plan. We've had two of them actually, they both look pretty much the same. It's rather lacking in actual targets, dates, and there's been no review to date. So that's a slip up there. Also, we have another opportunity in the 10% net biodiversity gain law. Now, I would like to know what backing the council is going to give to the planning authorities in terms of botanical knowledge and the right people to ensure that the Southwark Nature Action Plan and the 10% Biodiversity Gain Act are fully implemented. I want to see people who understand the botanical, the implications of removing parts of wildlife. It's not enough to replace mature landscapes with a few dying shrubs. And I think that we need to have more ecology officers in Southwark and education for the planning authorities to make sure that this law brings its full benefits. I'd like to know what the candidates will do to beef up Southwark's response to the biodiversity crisis.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. Clearly, our biodiversity of our is incredibly important, as you just heard me say. And thank you for your assessing and your praise about our nature action plan for the borough, which I encourage anyone who's interested to read. Really thoroughly sets out the habitats in our borough and our work to improve them. We've just introduced 18 new protected nature conservation sites across the borough to exactly make sure that we protect those established mature wildlife habitats across Southwark. As I say, we're committed to planting more trees and creating more quality green spaces across our borough. Now, all of that for me is absolutely as important and integral to the work on addressing the climate emergency more broadly. I do just want to touch on that as I haven't already. Southwark has declared a climate emergency. We set out our commitment to do everything we can to get Southwark to net zero by 2030. I think everybody here will know to get there will take action by all sorts of people, including national government, because it's a huge change, billions of pounds of investment we will need. But I'm very proud to say we've halved the council's carbon emissions already and committed to halve them again. That we've switched our council to being all renewable energy for our electricity. That we're installing heat pumps to serve 2,000 council homes right now, today, and we've upgraded 1,000 council homes to make them low, to make them more insulated as well, and we'll continue that work. You heard earlier the comment about Southwark putting in an extra £25 million to support that work, and that's absolutely right, we have. What wasn't said is that's on top of the 100 million we were already spending across the council. And so that commitment is absolutely bread and butter for us. And I think it's important to say, independently, we've been praised for the work we're doing on this. So there was a national independent review of council's climate action and plans across the country. Southwark came out second in London. It came out in the top 3% nationally. The only green run council in the country, Brighton, came mid-table. So whether you vote green to get green policies, I think is questionable. Actually, Labour councils across the country were up at the top of the league, but actually delivering on the climate emergency. I know this is going to be a really hard transition for us as a borough, and for me the important thing is we get it right and do it in a way that's fair. And that's why I'm prioritising, and Labour is prioritising the things that will help also reduce inequality in our borough. Insulating people's homes so they can have lower fuel bills. Cleaning the air on our streets so we can reduce the cost of pollution and deaths that come from it, that are having a much bigger toll on our lower income families and communities. So that's our commitment, and again I encourage everyone to read our manifesto because we set out in full detail the things we will do across the piece to make sure that our borough is one that's sustainable and that wildlife can thrive, but actually that people can thrive as well.
Thank you. Can we now go to Claire, please?
I completely agree. I mean, ecology in this crisis is one of the major things that we need to be protecting along the climate crisis. I do take a small issue with the idea that Labour's plans on climate change are oversee the Brighton and Homes plans. I mean, part of the reason that they were voted mid-range is that they started work on their climate action plan a full 3 years before Labour did. They were already spending money and making decisions in a very urgent context, while Labour sat on the money that they had. So I think this is a little unfair. And Labour's climate plan, I mean, it's been highly praised, but it's also been deeply criticised. I mean, by a number of community groups who've asked them to rewrite it. So I don't think it's entirely praiseworthy. I also think that there's a little bit of contradiction in protecting green spaces, but also building on a number of green spaces.
Yes, here. It's a disgrace.
On council estates, and also planning planning new houses, not socially rented houses, by the way, on green space, and already very, very low density of green space in that part of the borough. So I think, we could be doing so much more. We also could be we have some incredible activists around our parks in Southwark, people who really, really know what they're talking about. I would very much like to see them empowered, given money, have their voices heard by the council and understand what it is that we need to do for them in order to protect our spaces, which are so valuable, both for the environment and for our quality of life.
Councillor Williams' answer to that question was interesting, wasn't it? Because he didn't answer the question. And I'll tell you why he didn't answer the question, because he can't. You asked whether Southwark would declare, why Southwark hasn't declared an ecological emergency. Well, the Lib Dems proposed exactly that in November last year, and Councillor Williams, along with all of his Labour colleagues, voted against it.
Shame.
Yes, shame, absolutely shame. And while we're on the record while we're on the subject of their voting record, they've also voted 3 times at council meetings against protecting green spaces in our borough. And exactly as Claire said, those are really vital spaces for our community. They're obviously critical for people's physical and mental health, but they're absolutely critical as we address the environmental concerns that we all have. So that's the answer to your question, is that yes, we should have declared a climate emergency, not just in the future. We should have already done it last November when I and my colleagues, petitioners of the council, proposed to do exactly that. One other thing in Councillor Williams' answer which struck me was he said to get there, it's a climate emergency, he said to get there, we'll take action about other entities need to help. Well, there's a word missing in that sentence. To get there, we'll take urgent action. It's an emergency. The clue is in the name. We need to take action. Well, not even, I was going to say now. We don't need to take action now. We need to have taken action years ago. We need to have been taking action consistently over the last, certainly over the last 3 years since the council declared a climate emergency. And at the moment, sadly, we're not. And still, sadly, the council isn't taking urgent action for leadership.
We're going to now move on to the next question, next topic, really. This topic is about development planning. We've had so many questions about this, ranging from Canada Realtors to Old Kent Road to Peckham, Bankside, all over really. So the question comes from Ida. Ida, can I have the question, please?
Hello, my name is Ida Forster and I'm local to this area and I'm the chair of a Tenants and Residents Association, so I'm calling here. So I want us to talk about the impact of developments on local communities, sorry. And we've had a recent very poor experience of the planning process with regards to a major development that's just a few hundred metres from this cathedral. And I think we felt like we weren't heard in the process. And I don't want to go into details of what happened, so I've got time. But what I'd like to see is a process that involves local community, developers and planners getting in the same room together at a much earlier stage of the process so that residents can feel heard and that they're heard by the council and that their concerns and worries get addressed. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that, please.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Claire, please.
Thank you, Eric, for the question. I think you've kind of got to the nail of it there, in that what we would really like to see, and what I find when I talk to people, both to community activists and to people on the doorstep, is that they don't get consulted early enough by Bankside. by the Southwark Council. What we would really like to see is, at the beginning of big developments, any kind of development really, that people are consulted when the planning application comes in. So local communities, businesses, all kinds of, anyone who has a first stakeholder in it are consulted right from the very start, rather than what seems to be happening now, where Southwark is quite good at communicating what it is that they're doing, but they're not really listening to residents, and I think people feel really left out of this process. I think also they have quite a bad record of asking leading questions and getting the responses that they want, basically ignoring local communities, which I find deeply frustrating. One of the real pillars of Green Party policy nationally is that we want genuine democratisation of council processes. Everyone should be much more involved, if they want to be, in how our communities are planned and run. And as I said, I would like to see it starting to much earlier at our showing points that people feel listened to and have the kind of communities that they want to have.
Thank you. Well, when I was first elected as a councillor 8 years ago, we had something called community councils. Anyone else remember? Yes. Introduced by the Deb when we ran the council, and a really important way of devolving power, devolving decision making, and having a genuine engagement with the community that we all seek to serve. In our local areas. And sadly, over the last decade, Labour has essentially abolished having cut them massively 8 years ago and then abolishing them entirely a couple of years ago. And it's really sad, isn't it? Because, you know, I'm constantly in awe of the people in this borough. We have such an amazing, diverse community with knowledge and experience and passion and talent that the council should tap into. When we talk about consultation, often people talk about it, the council certainly talks about it, as if it's a barrier, as if it's a hurdle, as if it's something getting in the way of getting things done. And I think that's completely the wrong outcome. Consultation, if done well, is about involving the community in making this a better place. And we should be involving all of our residents to make this a better place. On the specifics of planning consultation, I share that sentiment entirely. It's so frustrating. As a ward councillor, constantly we're hearing from residents who just don't feel that they are being listened to in that process. The council does the tick box exercise, if you like, of consultation, but it's not meaningful, it's not real consultation. I want to see a much more open, transparent process with co-design, involving residents from the very outset in what's being done in their communities. And on the related point about kind of democracy as a whole, in our manifesto we're saying that we would introduce a committee system rather than the current cabinet. So instead of having councillors like Councillor William making decisions essentially behind closed doors, we have a much more transparent, open process which involves all of our councillors and our wider community. Because I think that's important, and it's so critical to making Southwark the wonderful place that I know it can be if we involve the people of Southwark to get there.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, for me, working with our community, not just consulting, but working with our community to achieve the changes we want, is fundamental to the things we need to do in our borough. And that goes from everything to working with families who are supporting to take over the Bankside Centre and run it themselves so they get the right care for their families, to the work we've done around the Community Support Alliance, which has got that support for 73,000 vulnerable people across our borough during COVID. The work we're currently doing to support organisations across Southwark to establish community fridges, getting vital, affordable food to families who are really struggling to fund their living costs right now. Right down to the new youth parliament that we've established, and indeed the Assistant Steward, we've just had on our climate work, climate emergency work, to look at how we can go even further than the current plan we have. We're bringing forward a new climate emergency plan in the summer, bringing in the recommendations from a representative group of Southwark residents across the board to listen to them. But of course, that's equally true on planning, I agree, and we have set out a consultation charter on planning decisions that means that landowners, before they get to the planning phase, have to themselves consult residents. The consultation then happens during, once they've made an application, the council runs that, and we also ask if there are any changes to the application during that process, so that the landowner again goes back out and consults the community. And that's above and beyond that almost any other council in the country does. It's a really clear charter. Although I have to say, the challenge we really face on planning is that the government had changed the rules. And they changed the rules about 8 years ago now to strip away some of the democratic powers of councils to affect those decisions. There's a new presumption in favour of development introduced, and it means that councils have less influence over their decisions. So it's a change that was made by the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in coalition government. And we now play this balancing game of the council working with the community, where we're trying to get the most out of every developer, we're trying to get the most affordable homes, we're trying to get the most investment in our community, the most jobs. I'm delighted to say that on planning applications we've got at least 35% affordable housing. When I say affordable, I mean social rent or shared ownership, something similar to that, genuinely affordable homes out of our schemes. We've got more apprenticeships than any other London borough out of those schemes. We're getting good quality units, more amenity space for the people that move into them, more business opportunities, and indeed, we're also getting affordable workspace for local businesses as well. And we're pushing to get all of those things out of developers who want to do something in our borough, working with the community to do that, as well as making sure the design standards are high. But at the same time, we always have hanging over us the threats that they will try and go above our head and go to the government to say, Southwark asks for too much, we'll go to you, and the government will give us planning permission instead. And I'm sad to say that in government, the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives made that easier for them to do, to go over our head. But as a Labour Council, we will keep pushing to get applications in our borough that deliver for our residents. We've had real success, and we'll keep pushing harder for you, working with you to do it. And I'd be delighted to talk to anyone if you've got more other proposals on how we can really flesh out how we do go even further than we're doing already.
Thank you. I'm going to take some questions from the audience, but before I do that, because there's been so many questions on this issue, and I've seen a lovely piece reading through them. One of the things, it was quite direct actually, the question that people were asking, specifically what I said earlier, and I think someone even mentioned that there was another council, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, that was doing this, where they were getting planners, they were getting the developer, and they were getting the community reps or organisations round the table early days. And I think in these questions I've seen a very similar theme, and they really put that question to you guys. Is that something that you could commit to if you were to become the leader after the 5th of May, that you would try to have those people around the table when it comes to major planning applications, starting with next week?
Yes.
And Claire?
Absolutely, yes.
And Claire?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. So there's
why are we paying that?
Yeah.
So we do look at that on major applications already. We require all developers to sit down with the community at early stage before they even put a planning application in to come and sit with the community and do that.
It's not in the way that makes this work.
Well,
not with plans, not with the council, it's not. That's not easy.
Well, I'd be very interested to look at that model as well, but we do really...
Well, all can go with all controlled debate.
Before they even put a planning application, and that's the important thing, because obviously, once you've got the planning application, they themselves have got lots of details to do that. But I'm very happy and interested in doing it even better ways in the future.
Yeah, so that's great. And just one thing to point out, some developers do want this, so I think it'll be great to be able to achieve that, and looking at the questions, that's what people have asked, I think, going forward, hopefully we can do that. I'm going to take a few questions.
Can I ask a question on that, please? Because
I was just about to get to that, so yes.
Just a moment, because I haven't spoken. You seem to want to curtail people speaking.
Yes.
And what I'm asking for to come back on what's been said there, so on about planners, people getting committees and all that. May I also tell you that that happened sorry. May I tell you that happened in the Warth Town Hall. That was curtailed by the developer who chose who he would let go to those meetings, those so-called round table meetings in the Warth Town Hall, where the Warth Town Hall was given away as such. So don't tell me, because it happened, and it happened under the council, both Labour and Liberal, because I, for one, wrote to Johnson City at the time. I also wrote to, and I also spoke to Victor Chamberlain, you name it, in the Liberal Party as such. And nobody did anything. And it was just a narrow view on behalf of the developer. So if you are going to do this, do it properly. That's what I'm asking for.
That's right.
Just before I ask people for their questions, I just apologise. I'm not trying to move or cut down anyone. I'm just trying to move it along because we only have a limited amount of time, so I apologise for that.
I understand.
So we have a few questions. There is a question from, if I may summarise, and if you feel that I've missed something, just because it's quite a long question. There is a person in the audience called Paul, who's asked a question specifically about rooftop extensions in East Bell's TRA.
Infill as well. Sorry? Rooftops and infill.
And infill. And the question, if I may summarise, suggests that there is a conflict between having these rooftop extensions and infills with the fact that people's quality of life can be affected, whether their green space is taken or whatever it may be. The question goes that should private developers be doing much more so that council tenants and those who are less well off are able to, are not sacrificing those little bits of green space or whatever they may have. That's the question. Is that fair to say?
More or less, do they recognise that this is a justice issue, and where do they stand on it?
Okay, thank you. So, Claire?
Yes, I absolutely do recognise it's a justice issue. I think the Southwark Council's plans for infilling and rooftop extensions are, well, they put the burden of having our new homes very squarely on the shoulders of people who are the poorest people in our communities. The reason that we have this need for council homes is because in real terms, the Labour Council have a net loss in the next, I'm sorry, I don't quite know the timeline, but according to Sean Barry's analysis of the London development data, we're going to be having a net loss of council homes of about 2,000 in Southwark, which is appalling. And this is largely to do with the demolition of the large Aylesbury and Haygate estates. We've lost huge
against the democratic wishes of the tenants.
Yeah, right. And they've not held the developers to account. The number of affordable and socially rented homes, the promises they exacted from the developers are down. And currently, we've only had 25%. It's 82 socially rented homes. The definition of affordable in affordable housing in London is in no way affordable in the terms that anyone really understands the London market. It's 80% of market rate is the market rate is 13 times the mean wage in Southwark. It is not affordable. I think what we really need, what I would really like to see, and it's not entirely local issue, it's something that central government also needs to be involved with, unfortunately, is that we need to see the definition of affordable change to be in line with wages and not to do with market rates. It's meaningless, frankly. And we need to be holding developers absolutely strictly to their promises of 35% housing.
Never.
I'm very glad to hear that they were learning lessons from this. Kieran Williams should take years, and that would be wonderful. But yes, it is a social justice issue, and it is a justice issue, and it's not being dealt with fairly currently. Thank you so much for your question.
So housing and the quality of environment are absolutely social justice issues. They are. And we face an incredibly awful situation actually for many people in our borough. So we've got 16,000 people on the waiting list for a council house in Southwark. And why is that? Well, that's
because you've been destroying council housing. That's why. Look at the elephant.
Let's be clear. Why is that? It's because private renting is completely unaffordable. You're talking £20,000, £25,000, £26,000 a year to rent in the private sector. Completely unaffordable. That's become even more unaffordable because successive Liberal Democrat and Conservative governments have cut the benefit system, so if you're on benefits, you can't afford to rent in the private sector. We've got a cap on what you can afford, you just simply can't afford a home in the private sector. It's because we've ended up in a situation where we've had huge cuts to funding for council house building. Again, under the Conservatives and Liberal Democratic government, they've cut funding for council house building. We as a Labour Party, locally, have been working to turn that round. That's why we're building council houses. As I said, we've got 2,500, we've got built or on-site being built across the borough. That's 70 sites across Southwark where you can go and see those council houses now either finished or being built. We're finding places to put those homes, and that's difficult. And I know it's absolutely something we need to work with. We're buying land on the Old Road, land with currently car parks to build those homes on. And yes, we're building them on some of them on land that we already own as a council. And why are we doing that? Because the land we already own makes we can build more homes. And we're working with the community to make decisions about that. On the Tustin estate and on the Ludbury estate, we've had ballots from communities to say, how can we improve your estate and build more homes on it? And received overwhelming support from those residents. On the Aylesbury estate, we've got 581 new council homes being built on that estate. Council homes that council rent and secure lifetime tenancies.
And you destroyed thousands. This is pathetic, your answer. Completely pathetic.
Where have we lost council homes?
Destroyed yourselves, not lost, destroyed. You did it.
Council homes have been lost to us through right to buy. So those are homes that tenants have the right to buy and they bought them. But unfortunately, it isn't mostly the tenants who used to be tenants that now live in them. Many of those homes are now private rental sector. So as a Labour Party, we want to end in Southwark that right to buy right. So we don't lose any more of our homes, so we can keep them for the residents that need them most. But building those homes will transform people's lives. Now I absolutely agree we have to work with residents to get every site right and work with the community around them. We're using old garage sites, it's an old car park, we're building some side extensions on homes, we've converted some old drying rooms into homes, we've put new homes on the ground floors of some of our tower blocks where there were other spaces previously. We're looking at every option to make sure we can build homes for people in our borough. And why are we doing it? We've got 16,000 people on the waiting list. Now those schemes have very high levels of support across the piece, and there are absolutely, I would agree, there are some sites where we needed to work more closely with the community to get them right. Bells Garden was a good example, where we had to go back and revisit our plans actually, and substantially change the original plans based on feedback from the community. I'm really glad to say that they have really strong support now on the estate. And it's a real change to what we were doing, and I'm really glad that community members who helped us make those changes. There was a reference made to getting the most out of development. This, of course, is really important too. So I'm very glad to say we've got over 4,000 homes consented through planning commissions over the last 4 years from developers. And we do not use the government's definition. That 80% definition is not something we recognise in Southwark for all the reasons you described. We set out in our planning policy, when we talk about affordable housing, it has to be either council housing, housing association housing, shared ownership, or affordable rent, which is at much lower levels than much cheaper levels than the 80% that the government's definition, one that Boris Johnson introduced in London when he was mayor of London in the London plan. We've gone for really clear examples. That's 4,000 homes. Of those, just over 2,000 are social homes. So that's either council housing, where the average rent per week is about £110, £120 for a 2-bedroom flat, or housing association homes, where it's a bit more, about £160, £180 a week for a 2-bedroom flat. These are homes that people can afford in our borough, and who are we building them for? It's for cleaners and people working in our supermarkets. It's for people who are nurses and care workers, people who are on incomes that, of course, cannot afford London's ridiculous prices to buy or to privately rent. And we have to find spaces for them. We have to work together to do that. It's not easy. I would love to have a national government that was putting in huge amounts of investment into these homes, not just in Southwark, but across the country. Because publicly owned housing, it just makes sense. It's the cheapest way to deliver homes for everybody. And if you go to Vienna or Switzerland or Sweden, you will find people on higher incomes living in public owned housing, loving the benefits of it, that they get a home that's so much cheaper, as well as people on lower incomes. So that's the change I'd like to get to, but for now, we'll keep building the homes that we can, working in the community to find spaces for them, using those old garages, those old car parks, buying new land, and making sure we deliver homes that local residents can afford to live in. It will transform their lives and the lives of people for generations to come.
And H. It's a lot there. To take it back initially to such a question. So I was really proud last year sometimes to go down to Charles Gardens and support the residents there who were opposing the council's plans to build on green space and on a forecourt on that estate. I'm fundamentally opposed to that type of development in Southwark. We have limited green space as it is, and we absolutely must protect what we have, and we should enhance it for people to use. It's fundamentally important for our physical and mental well-being and for our environmental objectives. There's even research that says that it improves life expectancy in areas where there's green space and reduces crime. Across the board, it's really vital. But even if you were to take out the kind of data and the science of it now, actually just think of the moral contract that the council has with its residents on estates. These green spaces were provided as part of that estate development in the first 60 years ago. It's supposed to be communal green space that's available to those residents who live in flats and balconies, sometimes without even balconies. That green space should be protected, and the council should never be planning to build on it. You shouldn't have to do that. On housing more widely, yes, we have a housing crisis in Southwark. We absolutely need to build more homes that are genuinely affordable for the people who need them. Now that means we need a mix of different types of affordability, but we need to absolutely be getting a lot more from private developers who are making millions and millions and millions of pounds in our borough from building and developing private housing. We absolutely should be getting a better share, fairer share for local people, for local families, and get the homes that we need. So in our manifesto, we're really proud that we have a commitment to force developers to give 15% affordable housing on private schemes, significantly more than the current Labour Council's policy. And I just want to get back for a moment as well to one of Councillor Williams' answers a little while ago. He was talking about developments going above our heads. Well, some of you may know, the last time the developer in Southwark went above the council's head after having their application refused by the council because it didn't deliver the affordable housing that it needed to, or that we wanted it to do. The developer, who in this case was Grosvenor, the Duke of Westminster's private development company that owns large swathes of the West End, they went above the council's head. They went to the Labour Mayor, and they asked the Labour Mayor to give the planning permission instead. And do you know what?
He gave it to them.
They got it.
Yeah.
So, it is a shame.
So the car must go too.
Indeed. I think it's a big issue, housing, of course it is. Yes, there does need to be more council house building. We
need to be more ambitious about the sites that we're looking at. There's no shortage, actually, of development sites in Southwark. You only have to look at the Old Head Road and the Canada Water area at the moment to see that there's huge swathes of development going on in our borough. But it's about ensuring that we are getting appropriate ambition for council house building and getting a real mix of genuinely affordable housing being delivered by partners. The Liberals have a plan, as I say, to massively increase the percentage that we're getting from the private sector. We also need to accelerate the delivery of council house building that way. And one final thing I'll just say is that at the moment there's a huge amount of the council's housing stock which isn't being used. And this is another shocking reality in Southwark at the moment. Southwark has one of the worst records in London for empty homes. In the last, as of last year, it's remarkable, I think. In the last year, or just over a year ago, the council only managed to rehouse 849 households in Southwark. Out of the waiting list of 16,000, as we've heard. And at the same time, the council has, on its books, 1,211 empty properties. There's council homes in Southwark right now sitting empty that families desperately need and that we should be putting to good use. So there's a real scandal across the board, across the piece with Southwark's housing record. And it doesn't stop just with building new homes. It also includes using the homes we've already got in the way that they were intended.
Thank you. So we're going to take some questions from the audience, and there are some questions that have been asked. One of them, if they are here, Sudhir here. So there are a few questions asked, and if I can just ask the panellists to answer maybe in 1 minute. It's a really direct question. Is there more? Essentially, they were asking about the fact that travel and transport in the Rotherhithe area is quite expensive. The only affordable means was bus, and that the ferry was £4.50, I believe. And is there anything more that can be done to establish that bridge or make that bridge happen? So, if I can answer that question, if you wanted to respond to what I said.
I think the interesting thing in Hamish's response just there is the Liberal Democrats have never promised to build a single council home.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. It's a lie. We have.
You've never put it in your manifesto?
It's not manifesto.
But you've never said how many you build?
We'll accelerate your current plans. No, you're not building.
How many can build?
Well, currently the council's policy is to build 11,000. We would absolutely deliver that and accelerate the delivery.
How many does your manifesto say you build?
We'll accelerate that policy.
How many does your manifesto say you build?
11,000 is implicit in that answer.
There's no answer there, really, is there? He's making up on the detail. He talks about
how many will he destroy? Will he destroy more than you?
Planning system. What definition of affordable housing do you mean?
Genuinely affordable housing, I mean a mix.
Does your manifesto say that? Yes. Does it talk about social rent?
Yeah.
What are we talking about? No, it doesn't. Your manifesto just talks about the definition that was used over here. 80% of market rent.
No, it doesn't.
The Liberal Democrats.
It doesn't say 80% market rent.
Why is it in meetings with tenants that some of your councillors talk about not wanting more council housing because it brings the reputation of the area down?
I'm not sure that's true.
That's what I've heard them say.
This is what come on. Can we have a question from me? This is a club. They should go into town hall and write.
There's promises, but there's no detail. There's no reality.
Delivery. You're on the
2,500 new councilmen in the borough right now. I can take you on a tour and go and see them.
They're not built. They're not built.
Let's go to Bridges Park and look at what you can see across the area. Go and look at the Goshen homes. Go and look at the new homes that we've just delivered in Pack. Go and look at the new homes we just finished in Rotherhithe, actually at Canada Water. You talked about the Old Head Road. We bought land on the Old Head Road. Why can't build council homes? The plans are there, they're real, we're delivering them at pace. The Liberal Democrats are just not promising any detail. In the same way that your manifesto is a leaflet. it doesn't set out a plan for the borough. It sets out a few catchy slogans and headlines. But let me get back to your specific question. We're going to microphone.
Specifically about the Royal High Bridge, is there more that can be done to establish that bridge? That's what those are questions were about.
Yeah, so I mean, the affordability of transport across our cities is really important. I mentioned earlier the work that the Mayor's done to introduce the hopper fare that genuinely transformed the lives of many people on the lowest incomes in our borough who were previously having to pay for multiple bus fares to get to work, to get to their families and friends. And keeping those fares low has been transformational. Of course, we've been improving walking and cycling as well, and that too has really made a difference. And you've got the new segregated cycle lane that takes us all the way down to Maple Road and into Rotherhithe, a really important piece of infrastructure for the borough. We have set out our determination to continue to push for a proper river crossing. What's getting in the way of that happening? Again, it is a national government, not the Lib Dems this time, definitely the Tories, but the Tories cutting back TfL's funding so that opportunities for those long-term infrastructure projects are being swept away. We have a national government that talks about levelling up Britain, but actually it means levelling down London. Taking away investment from the things that we know will not just improve our economy, get our incomes going back up again, but actually will help us tackle the climate emergency in a real fundamental way. We urgently need a government to change that. But in the meantime, we'll keep doing the things we can locally, doubling the number of cycle hangers, rolling out more segregated cycle lanes, providing free training for people to cycle as well, providing local support for people, improving our train stations, including those that serve Rotherhithe as well.
Thank you. If there's anything you want to say, Claire, on the Rotherhithe Bridge?
On the Rotherhithe Bridge, I apologise to the audience. I don't know the details of the Rotherhithe Bridge, but I do think there probably are things that we could be doing as a council. We could be lobbying the mayor or central government for this. The cost of transport is something that's increasingly difficult for people. I mean, we've been to the hopper fare a lot. It has just gone up by 10p, which is it's not a huge amount of money, but it does make a big difference. And I think we really need to be making a great push to get people, first of all, to keep public transport fares as static as possible, and also to help people get out of cars. Of course, they're expensive and difficult. I'm sorry to repeat my point, but maybe provide enough cycle hangers for the number of residents in Southwark, as well as helping them get access to bicycles through publicising the various schemes that are already available.
Thank you. And Hamish?
Thank you. Well, I'll answer the question by saying I think the reference to one thing. Councillor Lim has a couple of times mentioned the hopper fare. It is indeed a brilliant improvement for people, a brilliant policy, and it was an endeavour, and I massively applaud my colleague Caroline Kitchen, who has been involved with this at the City Hall for years and years, and it's great to see the findings introduced recently. On the subject of river crossing, so I would mention it earlier in the evening.
I'm Piers Corbyn, leader of Let London Live.
Please, if you could shorten it and make it into a question.
Yes, it is. It's a three-part question. Can people hear, or should I have a microphone?
I can hear you.
You can hear me, but can people hear? Thank you. Oh, that's in case I carry on too long, isn't it? Yes, I know. Okay. I'm Piers Corbyn, leader of the Let London Live party. I'm a scientist, a businessman, and also responsible for the building of the South East London Combined Heat Power Station when I was chair of the consulting board a long time ago. And I'm also a long-range forecaster. So it's a three-part question that all relates to development. Would the candidates, if they get elected, organise a public debate about the truth or not of man-made climate change? Because I know the facts are that there's no scientific paper in the world which shows that carbon dioxide levels drive temperatures. The reality is the other way. And this stuff is fundamental to what they do in planning. Second question, it's about the problems we're suffering now, a crisis of jobs and prices, which flow directly from the lockdowns. So, and the Labour Party, Servile Labour Party, follow the Tory policy, so they can't blame anybody for that. I want a promise from these leaders that when they get in, they will never again have any more lockdowns or these mad restrictions. And the third policy question is about housing. We know all these dodgy deals that go on with developers. We want a policy undertaking now that they will end or renegotiate all the deals with developers which involve a reduction of actual council housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that you kept some questions. Claire, please.
Right, well, I don't think that climate change is a matter of debate. I think there's plenty of evidence that 98% of scientists
No, that's untrue. But produce as one scientific paper. It's a challenge to this lady. Produce one scientific paper which shows, with real data, well, later if you want, but now if you can, real data showing that carbon dioxide levels drive temperature. There is not one.
Please.
Well,
I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, but she says there's no debate. I'm pointing out there is a debate.
I'm saying it's not a matter of public debate. I'm saying there are experts who measure our climate and they agree that it is changing.
The government agents agree. There's thousands of experts who disagree. Maybe in one of them.
I think the debate is going on. You know, this debate is going on. We've been having this debate for a long time, which is one of the reasons we've not been taking urgent action. It's because people have been listening to those who say that there is no problem, and there is a problem. There is a massive consensus that there is a problem. And the longer, I mean, I can't believe it's still sort of obsession about it.
I'm just asking whether you have a debate with it or not.
If you would like, I mean, I can't believe that I'll convince you by giving you a paper. But if I can find one, I will do that thing.
Please, thank you very much.
Regarding lockdowns, it's not we don't make any, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any say about this on a council level. This is something that national governments have to decide. So I'm afraid I don't exactly have a position on that. Well, I'm afraid I forgot what the third question was.
The third question was about housing policy and the council renegotiating all of the reduction in council homes.
Renegotiating
all the negotiations with developers about.
Renegotiating the negotiations as well.
Well, renegotiating any plans which involve reduction of council housing when they do development. Like the Elsley, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Elephant.
I think
the council lied on Elephant.
I mean, I do feel great sadness about the Elephants in Castle site and the Hayden Estate. I mean, I have to say, I do think in some ways it's been a very positive change in the area, but in many other ways it's been deeply divisive, and communities have been disrupted. But I think actually, I mean, there are things that I would like to see from this last phase of development in the H1 Tower. It would be lovely if the council would get levies to possibly fulfil its promises of the 35% affordable housing there. I'm afraid I don't know the specifics. I do so I'm afraid I can't answer that question forward. But and I don't know enough about having enough to say whether or not you can really negotiate contracts once they've been signed. But I do also know that a number of the units that were sold by as affordable housing on the Elephant Estate were the developer was taken to court for selling it out of market rate. They're obviously something obviously has gone wrong here, and we should be doing what's in our power to change that.
Thank you. And Hamish, please.
Thank you. Well, look, I'm sure I'm not going to convince peers that climate change exists. Any answer I can give this evening.
Well, I'm a scientist.
One thing that I would say is that we are seeing right now the impact, human cost of climate change. And for example, just in the last couple of years, the UK has recorded the first ever death to be officially linked to air pollution. On southeast London roads, a young girl named Ella Deborah who died because of the air pollution.
Yeah, but there's nothing to do with CO2. This is a stupid
These are serious
issues
that are currently killing children in our cities. We absolutely have to do what we can and play our part in tackling it. On the housing question, fundamentally, I believe that we should be protecting and utilising the council homes that we have got where we have them. I mean, on the Haygate, for example, the Labour Council, right at the beginning of its tenure, rushed to sign a deal, having made a big play out of it in the election campaign, rushed to sign a deal with lenders, and as a consequence, signed a deal that was far, far, far below what they should be.
Absolutely cool.
Just 25% affordable housing, which wasn't affordable. We went from having about 1,200 council homes on the Haygate to having fewer than 100. That's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable, and it should never be allowed to happen.
Here.
Thank you.
The council lied. I was Labour organiser at the time, and they broke every promise to keep the number of council houses.
In a rare moment of unity on this panel, there is a real climate emergency happening in this world. The evidence is overwhelming. The reports from the International Panel on Climate Change are comprehensive.
Which is an echo chamber of
They set out
lies.
both the depth of the challenge, the impact it's already having, and the urgent need for change. And you know, that for me is not up for debate, or is not needed to be debated. What we need to focus on is the action that we're now delivering. That's why we put it centre stage in our Labour manifesto. On lockdown saved hundreds of lives in our community. I spent hours talking with
people being driven mad. I've seen them and dying.
Nurses who were working in our intensive care units,
cutting all cancer patients,
who were just overwhelmed with the people that they had on ventilators, and they were so clear in the need for us to collectively act. And I was so proud of everyone in our community for collectively abiding by those lockdowns. And I want to give my thanks to everyone who's here and who's watching and everyone for participating in that, because we saved lives between us. And it is now, it's unimaginable, isn't it? Now we're watching the news and finding out that the only people that weren't abiding by it were in 10 Downing Street. On council, on our estates, so I think it's important to set the record a little straight on something that was just said. So in 2010, yes, Labour did take over the council and became the administration. At that point, Labour inherited, before my time, but we inherited a Haygate estate where the previous administration, Conservative and Liberal Democrats, had moved almost every tenant off the estate, didn't have a plan of what to do with it, full of empty buildings, and Labour had to find, as you'll all recall, the kind of hardest bit of the recession, that was 2008, a plan to work out what to do with the estate that the previous administration had emptied, moved everybody off, but didn't have any plan to do with it. And we worked very hard to get the best we could at that time. The new leisure centre, the new park, affordable workspace for local businesses, affordable homes. I absolutely would have liked to have got an even better deal that had more affordable houses in particular. I think in almost every other respect, it's a fantastic place. I would have liked to have had even more affordable housing. But I have empathy for the leaders of our party there, who were faced with the fact that they'd inherited a mess from the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, completely emptied the estate without any plans to actually do something with it. On the Aylesbury, I'm really proud that we've got an estate where our claim is there will be no loss of social rent homes on that estate. Actually, if you go there, as I said earlier, you see 581 new council homes we've got there, and I'm looking to see if we can extend that even more. And on the other estates, there are only a handful of them, or in fact there are only 2 more, where we've worked with residents more recently. We've had balance with them, we've gone through full detailed consultations with them about the future of their estate, what they'd like to see, what kind of green space they'd like, what kind of homes they would like, improvements to the school in one case. and had overwhelming support from those residents. So part of the reason there's overwhelming support is because there will be an increase in council homes on both of those estates, on the Chaston and on the Redwood. So our Labour commitment to make sure we work with communities that we deliver more council housing on estates where they need renewing, of which I don't expect there to be many more than those I've just described anymore, is absolute, and we will keep looking to get better and better for our residents.
Thank you. I'm just going to move on to there's Jeanette. So Jeanette has asked a question, and she's from the Newington ward, and she's asked she's asked a question about Section 106 and seal monies, and she understands that there's Section 106 and seal monies that have been raised or accrued in her ward, and she's asked when are those monies going to be released, and can they be spent in a way which is spent for those people who are impacted immediately next to the developments where the developers have accrued that money. So there's both Section 106 and seal money, and I think there's been some other questions on this. I think there was a question from Peckham as well, but that's the question. So, Hamish.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, Section 106 is still generically is a developer contribution. So this is what we've been talking about a little bit already this evening, isn't it? What we want back from the developers who are coming into our borough, making millions of pounds from their projects here, but making sure that they give something back to the community. And often that's in the form of affordable housing, but there can be other contributions as well. The council is currently developing, I think still developing, I'm not sure, it started a long time ago, its policy for how to allocate that money, that still money, community infrastructure levy money. The majority of the money will go to big strategic type projects, and I'm sure we will support some of those projects, so things like the Castle Tube Station improvements, of course. That's a worthy project for the borough as a whole. But then beyond that, there's a portion of the money, I think 25%, is that right? Okay, 25%, which is supposed to be used in the immediate community, the area that's immediately affected by the development. And what might be really sad to see is that the council is not committed to keeping that money, those funds, in that immediate area. There's all sorts of convoluted and complex regioning and caps and allocations that the council has talked about over the last few years. And I think fundamentally, where there are developers coming in our immediate neighbourhoods, when developers are I was going to stick their hand in their pocket and pay some money, I mean pennies frankly for these developers, but when they are putting something back into the community, I think it's vital that funding is ring-fenced and is spent in the immediate area to benefit those residents and those neighbourhoods who are directly affected by development.
Thank you, and Claire?
I don't have a lot more to add to that, except that well, I like to agree. I think that they should be spent. Obviously, it's really important that developers who are making an enormous amount of money building something do contribute back to the communities and compensate those for the construction in the local area construction. Of course, the only thing that I would add additionally is that obviously it's very important that we talk to residents about exactly how it is that they need that money spent. Because only they can do that.
Thank you, and
so, I mean, yes, it's a straightforward answer. Well, it's worth saying there is a slight difference between Section 106, Section 106 and the community infrastructure levy. So Section 106 is payments that are taken from the developer for a very particular person, tied down in a planning consent, so they might improve the local park, improve the local school, improve cycling infrastructure immediately around the development. So they're always very linked to right outside, right around that development, because that's all that builds. Whereas the community infrastructure levy is effectively a tax on developers. And we get that to the council, and we split that into the big projects that we need to deliver, investing in the Alfred Castle Northern Line entrance, making sure we've got a decent station that's not overcrowded for people with proper access, on the one hand, and local projects. Those local projects are already being allocated, so we're already giving out that money across the borough, in the area around where it was collected, and that's been decisions on investments in community safety work, in green spaces, in cycle storage and other things immediately around where sites are. And we do that process with residents. We have meetings with local residents, we invite them in and ask them what they think the priorities and what projects should be in their community, hear their priorities, prioritise them, and then put investment into them. The last thing I'll say on this though is, this is one that is in real danger, because the Conservatives in government have been talking about changing the way these things work, so that money isn't kept locally in your neighbourhood, isn't kept locally in Southwark, but is taken back nationally. Now they seem to have gone pause on that, but that is a real risk for us again. It's another bit of this Conservative mantra about levelling down London, taking money to their red wall seats so they can try and win elections, taking away that investment from us. We fought very hard as a council, a Labour council with others across the country to stop that change, and we won this time round, but I have no doubt that they will try and come back and take that money again so they can use it elsewhere where they think it's electorally advantageous for them.
Yes, please. Can I ask a question on that?
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Go on.
You've spoken about this 106 money. You've spoken about the 106 money as such. Do you not think it's time that the 106 money that comes from these developers for improvements in areas, or whatever the case may be, would be published? As we go back to the Town Hall again, I've asked the previous councillors there for what money there was with the 106 money. Now I understand some of that 106 money is going back to the developer again. So it comes from the developer, goes back to the developer, because there's plans to have the architecture put back in exactly the same way. So what I'm asking you as all the leaders of the party, if you're elected, can you not publish what these developers actually say? For example, you made a comment there about the Elephant and Castle tube station. Well, Delancey put that money up. We don't know what that money is, but the people who had a claim on that is TfL. So as soon as that money came in from the developer, again, TfL put their hands on it. So that's the sort of thing we ought to be knowing, and residents ought to be knowing. When these developments come about, then tell us what 106 money there is from it, so that we have some say in that money, not saying, oh, like, we leave it to local councillors to decide. I mean, I've heard like the bit around the Wharf Road, we're going to make a piazza down at St Peter's Churchyard, down there and all that. So what I'm asking for, let me just finish. What I'm asking for is basically for it to be published, and there's no reason why none of this money that comes from these developers shouldn't be published and let the public know, and especially the taxpayer of Surrey.
Thank you. So yes, if you want to have transparency in the publishing, and if the local community can have a say on those monies and how it's spent.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with the local community having a say.
Thank you. Hamish.
Yes, I think across the board the council should be more transparent, and it's a perfect example of it. It's also a perfect example of the importance of devolving power decision-making and involving the community in deciding how that money is spent. And one other thing I would say is that all of this conversation actually hinges on one key thing. It hinges on how you define local. And I rather suspect that the council currently has a very different definition of local when it comes to this conversation, this topic, as most people in this room, and that's ultimately the issue. But fundamentally, I completely agree. It's important that the council is much more transparent on many things, I should say. But this one.
Well, then just let us see it. Just let us see what the figures are. Coming from these developers, then we say it's a good deal or a bad deal.
Thank you. Just on that, so Jeanette's question was quite clear. She wanted to see and know that if there was going to be a commitment to that money being spent, not area-wide, not ward-wide, not borough-wide, that money being spent directly on her street or around her street, in the playground that her children use or her neighbours use. That's what she wanted to know if that was a commitment, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think yes, I think it should be, just to be really clear. I think what she's asking for is absolutely what it should be. You know, money that's being raised by developers here in Borough and Bankside should be spent here in Borough and Bankside. It shouldn't be sucked out into wider neighbourhoods just because the council has a slightly looser definition of local when it comes to this.
Let us know the figures.
So the system we have, as described a moment ago, has 2 tiers. So we take some of the bigger projects, like the Elephant Castle Tube Station, which we know will serve a wider community, but cost more money to do, and they're really important. And some of it's made locally. I don't think I could ever say locally would be just on one street, because often actually what people want is an improvement to their local park. It might just serve the 20 streets in that neighbourhood, but they'd like to put the money in there. We don't want to tie it down so it's in really small areas, because then we wouldn't be able to deliver the things that people want. But really importantly on this, on our local infrastructure levy money, those are decisions where people who live in that local area, the 1 or 2 wards that cover that area, get to come along and make their suggestions. So it's by ward, make their suggestions for what should be spent in their ward and the best way to use the money. And on the question about section 106, so that information is currently published. It's published with a planning consent, so when someone gets a planning permission,
it's not at the moment,
it is now. It sets out what the
excuse me, I don't really want to get into an arguing debate with you and I sitting here, but it's not happened. I don't know when you're talking about. You're only talking about really recently, because when you go back, and I can go back to the Aylesbury estate, to the Elephant and Castle, Haygate, to the shopping centre, Delancey and all that. Nobody ever told anybody anything about figures there, although you've been asking councillors.
So, I can't vouch for a decade ago, but I can certainly say for the last few years, when we give planning permission...
It's not the last few years.
Over the last few years, when we give planning permission, we set out how much section 106 will be collected and what it's for, and what that money's for. And the community infrastructure, we set out how much will be collected and what it's for. So that information is there when they get planning permission. And obviously we can provide all of the information about how it's spent, and the community infrastructure is all done publicly, how we actually identify the individual project with the local community in the ward.
Thank you, Councillor. You're still holding it to the chest.
Two parts of two questions. First question on spending. Yes, I do. I mean, obviously, projects of the council level need to be funded, but I do think that by board is not an appropriate enough granulation. The needs in one part of the board are often quite different from that in the other part of the board. So yes, I think we can very commitment to say that we be spending part of that money much more locally. In regard to openness or sharing information outside the council, I do think again that Southwark has a very bad record on this. I was reading just today in Southwark News about a request for freedom of information request with a meeting with the developer in January for the Aylesbury estate, where every single line was redacted. And we need much more clarity as citizens from our council. I don't think it's at all appropriate that we should be left out, or the citizens should be left out of the discussions with developers at any stage of the process.
Thank you. I'm going to take now questions from the audience, please. Gentleman at the back.
Thank you. An easy question for the panel, I think. Would panelists agree with me that nearby Borough High Street and its environs represents a highly significant cultural and historic part of Southwark and indeed in the story of London? But despite this, it's a bit of an unloved experience. Whether as a pedestrian, cyclist, driver, or passenger on a bus, it's it's not really very pleasant experience. And if you were to venture down there after dark, it can be a pretty dangerous one too. And I just wonder, can we not do better for this generation and indeed future ones? So will you make a commitment this evening, if elected leader, that you at least bring all the interested parties together, perhaps even living Bankside as well, and to form a master plan for the area, and not just do that, but to act, so that we can transform this very historic space and street which links to Chaucer and Dickens and Shakespeare, and make an exemplar and a showcase for the entire borough and indeed the city.
Thank you. If we could get 30 seconds to 1 minute answer, that'd be wonderful. Kieran.
Delighted to bring people together to look at that. We've obviously had a lot of improvements at the side streets, but I appreciate the main road itself, which is managed by Transport for London. It still needs work to do, and we've still got lots of those temporary barriers post-COVID there, and look to provide more pedestrian realm, but we'd love to make those a more permanent quality pedestrian experience around the side. Yes, I'm delighted to bring people together to look at how to do that now.
Thank you. And Hamish?
I mean, yes, absolutely. It's a simple answer. When I first moved to Southwark, I lived in Borough, and I thought it was a wonderful area with so much history and heritage and offering for local people. Developing the master plan sounds fantastic. We absolutely support that. Indeed, I've done something similar in Cheltenham, which is in my ward, working with the community over the last 5 or so years. The other thing I would just quickly say, is that I'm very proud of my colleagues standing in Borough of Bankside, who, as part of their platform for the election this year, are committed to exploring possibilities such as seeking UNESCO World Heritage status for the borough, which would really be a testament to the area, all of its history, and all of the grace that you mentioned in your budget.
Thank you, Angela.
Yes, absolutely. It's wonderful. It does also need improvement. Everyone in the local area and all those with interest in it should be involved in the discussion of its development. So, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to have one more question from the audience, and then I'm going to try and get to some of the other questions that have been posted. If you can be as brief as possible, and if I can get 1 minute maximum answers from people, because we're getting to the closing statements. Lady there in front, please.
My question is about basic service delivery from the council. My neighbours we've been reporting tree lamp posts that the gangway along the river, which is very dark and dangerous, reported in January. Then it had to be re-reported. Nothing happens. It's the same with recycling. We don't get deliveries. We report them. Then we have to re-report them, then they get registered as complaints. It's a complete disaster, and I understand COVID has affected staff absence, and the council has issues along that, but I think we serve better service delivery for the level of council tax that we're paying.
Thank you.
Well, I want the council to have really high standards. You're absolutely right that COVID has set some of those back for us, and we're running to catch up, if you like, in areas where you have areas of the workforce either off work or unable to do some of the things that they were previously doing through social distancing. We've committed in our manifesto our plans to set out to upgrade street lighting, for example, across the whole borough. We've done 6,000 of those, we'll do them across the whole Southwark. Our teams now will already go out and do a weekly patrol around the borough looking for streetlights that are out. And again, if you want to have a chat with me at the end about any specific ones you want to look at, I'm delighted to do that. I'm really proud to say that we've got one of the highest levels of recycling in inner London, and we're aiming to get up to the top spot. Currently not to spot 2, but again, if you'd like to talk to me around at the end about any specifics you'd like to look at, then I'd be delighted to do that. And I know our Labour councillors have always been really responsive on addressing these issues to people when they come up and address that as well.
Thank you. Claire.
This is, thank you so much for asking. This is echoed a lot by people that I speak to on the doorstep while I'm campaigning. I don't think it's quite acceptable, and I don't entirely understand where it is that we're going wrong with this, because it's relatively simple. There's also some kind of disconnect between people actually getting through to the council, being able to report their issues, and it being actioned. And if we do get to the council, we'll be investigating exactly what decision, trying our best to improve it.
Thank you. And H.
Yes, I completely agree. I think the council is failing on this basic service delivery at the moment. And it goes across the board on so many different council services. I mean, we're currently one of the worst councils in the borough for fly tipping, for example. I think the 11th worst council in the whole country. There's issues about street lights, issues about repairs on the state. All of the complaints that the council, all of the complaints that are coming up in the council that actually the council isn't necessarily even hearing because they don't have the proper systems in place. If you try and report something to the council these days, you can barely do it on the phone. You just can't speak to people. I remember when we used to have one-stop shops in the borough, so you could go in and actually talk to a council officer and say, this is my problem, how can you sort it out for me? And they would be able to do what was needed. Those are gone. As I say, you can barely phone anyone now. You're generally told to report something online, by email, and if your website even works, which often it doesn't, then nothing actually happens as a result. And it's just not good enough, frankly. It absolutely shouldn't be how the council is working. We need to get a grip. We have plans to get a grip, and it seems that the Labour has run out of the ability to do the basics in our borough.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to some questions that I have. Is there a Michelle in the audience? So this is a question which I've received a few questions on this, and I should say that we as an organisation have been petitioned on this as well. It's about the Ocean Diva, which is a party boat, and it's going to be affecting the repairing parts of our borough. So Rotherhithe, Bermondsey, Borough Bankside, and West Bermondsey. And the question really is, what would the parties do? It's that stage where the planning application, which was going to host the boat, was rejected, but the PLA, I believe, are wanting to allow this boat to sail up and down the river, which will have effects on ecology, environment, and many other things the residents say. So, yeah, cool.
Just one hand, and I'll come back to that. I think there's a bit of rewriting history going on here. So I'm going to reiterate some things I said at the beginning, because I think they're really important to remember. So in 2010, previous to that, the council was run by Liberal Democrats and Conservatives. It's a while ago now, I appreciate that, but I think it is important to remember what happened there. So at that point, before Labour took over, Southwark had the third worst council tax collection rate in the country. That meant lots of people in the borough were not having their tax collected from them. The council didn't have the money it should have had in its pocket. It had the 6th worst recycling rate in the country. It had the 8th worst adult social care service in the country. It had barely half of the council housing meeting the decent home standard, and that was after a Labour government that spent a decade pouring billions into bringing council housing up to a good standard, and yet somehow, between the Lib Dems and Conservatives, have failed to access any of that money and to improve local homes. It didn't even have a housing department. We're responsible for the biggest social landlord in London, the biggest council landlord in London, by some distance, there wasn't even a housing department. That's the record of the Lib Dems running this council. What we face since then, that Labour has had to contend with, is a 2/3 cut to our budget from government. 2/3. And that has happened. The fastest part of that was under the Lib Dems and Conservative government. It's continued, obviously, with the Conservative government since. And what have we done as a council, as a Labour council since then? We've opened 5 libraries. We've got our council housing to be 98% meeting decent home standard. We've improved our parks. Please just walk around their parks. Remember what they used to look like a decade ago. They were literally full of burnt-out cars. They had burnt-out cars in them. They were in a really poor state. Burgess Park, Dickens Square Gardens. These are places that have been transformed over the last decade. And we've done that with 2/3 of the budget that they had when they were running the council. Now, I'm not going to say the council's perfect. I absolutely want to improve things more, and absolutely agree that we need to improve some of the access to services after the setback of the pandemic, and make sure that when you want to phone the council, you get a decent service. And I'm determined that we improve that customer service for you as we've improved those other things, as we've managed to get our schools to be 95% good or outstanding in the borough, as we've got to open those new library schools, those new parks, free healthy school meals for our primary school children, free swim and gym for you at our local leisure centres. All of those things that have changed people's lives here and driven up the quality of the services you get. But yeah, let's make sure that we continue that journey of improvement for you as we have delivered as a local council.
You just want to address the question on the question. The question on the
Obviously, yes, the short answer is I don't know the full details and I'd like to look into them. I mean, obviously, I'm concerned about both the impact on foreshore and the impact on wildlife on the river. I know the standards have been put up hugely for developments along the riverbank, and so actually it's now very hard to get any permissions that would have a negative impact on the ecology of the river. It's one of the fantastic actual successes of our city over the last few years that we've seen wildlife returning into the Thames, and we need to protect it.
It's disappointing that the leader of the council doesn't know the details about Ocean Diva. To fill it in and representing a ward with leader quite close to the river myself, we have, don't we, particular issues with the river, particular issues with party boats going up and down the river, playing by that buoys, in addition to the climate concerns that have been mentioned. And to help Councillor Williams, Ocean Diva would be by far and away the biggest such party boat if it is allowed to operate. I'm really proud to have, a couple of years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago I think, objected to the planning application from here across the river in the City of London, and I'm glad to see that the City of London turned down the planning application. But of course the battle isn't over yet. That battle was won, but the war isn't over, I think is the phrase, isn't it? And of course Ocean Diva and their owners are still pressing ahead with their plans and want to use the existing piers on the river. So I hope that regardless of the outcome of the election, that Councillor Williams will commit to working with me and working across party with all councillors who are elected to continue to oppose those plans and to ask the Mayor of London, who is of course the chairman of TfL, to put his foot down and ensure that the Ocean Diva and the other party boat for that matter are not able to use publicly owned piers in order to dock. That's the solution to make sure we can't operate. And I hope that Councillor Williams will support me in making that case more widely than just doing something.
Thank you. And Claire, please.
I don't think we've got more to add, except that I did agree that you should have permission is behind detrimental to both the ecology and the well-being of the people living in the river. So yeah, I very much hope that we make commitments to stop this working.
Thank you. We have about 4 minutes of those closing statements. I just wanted to ask, there's a question that was put forward specifically about the development which is near to here, and the petitioners wanted to know if after the election, whoever is leader, would meet with them or meet with the residents, or they would introduce them to planning officers, whoever they may be, to discuss that planning application. That planning application, from their point of view, they were consulted but not listened to, and sort of like a commitment. It's Minerva House, which is literally across from the cathedral, so they just wanted to know if you would arrange that whoever becomes leader. If it's just a yes or no, really, or you want to add anything else to it.
Yes, very happy to make that clear.
Yes, very happy to.
Thank you. I think we could take one question if it's very brief. Come on, gentlemen, please. If it's a very brief question.
Thank you. We've heard tonight about consultation or lack of. We've heard tonight about planning development and the planning developer stroke council loving. And you've also heard about the lack of transparency, in particular has been highlighted about recent freedom of information requests which have been heavily redacted. There's clearly an issue in the infrastructure within our council about gagging and suffocating. And we know there's been 2 criminal arrests, wrongful arrests relating to misdirection of people, elected members misdirecting police, relating to whistleblowing. And we've had a scenario where consultation hasn't worked, and consultation groups or bodies or residents are taken to social media and were roundly attacked by this union movement. A cabinet member was found, he was caught, it took 11 months for the council to come to some... So my question is, if leadership changes, can we get a change in the culture within the council so there's accountability and there's a disciplinary framework adopted by all the parties?
Thank you. Kevin, please.
So I think accountability in public life is incredibly important, and I'm always committed to it, and I expect that from everyone who's in our Labour group, and obviously we'll take action if ever need to. I didn't recognise the points you made about arrests. I think that might be something that I don't agree with what you're saying there. But a fundamentally good point is we work to be an open and transparent council. Our decisions are made in public. We work with the community to set them out in great detail. I sometimes think our cabinet reports, if anything, are too long, setting out too much detail and a bit too long a read for anyone who wants to read through them. Perhaps we could do better on that. But for me, being transparent and accountable to the public is really important, and that's why we have such an extensive process of doing that across the council.
Thank you. James, please.
Accountability is incredibly important in those work. Councillor Williams has worked as well. I agree. Accountability is incredibly important, and it's a shame that the individual that you're referring to, sir, hasn't been held accountable at all for his actions, despite being found to be in breach of the council's code of conduct. He had no sanctions, didn't resign as a councillor, and in fact is standing again next Thursday and asking his residents in his ward to vote for him. But the worst thing of all, actually, isn't just what he did and the failure to hold him accountable. It's that when he resigned from the cabinet, he got a payment of nearly £5,000. Council's loss of office payment, a golden goodbye handed out to cabinet members who stand down or are fired or leave the cabinet for any reasons. As far as I'm aware, it's the only council in the country that has these sorts of payments. It's absolutely scandalous, and in particular in this case. If I become leader of Southwark Council next Thursday, then one of the first things that we will do is abolish those payments.
Sure. Thank you very much. Sorry.
That's fine. Yes, I mean, it's when I learned about this, I frankly cannot believe it. It not only speaks to the lack of accountability within the local council, but also it speaks to a real culture of disregard to residents and to residents' groups and residents' opinions. I think it's disgusting, frankly, and I don't think this person should still be sitting on the council or be up for re-election. I think it should be. I think actually they probably should have been had their membership of the Labour Party struck. I think we would have done that if we'd known that that was the case. I think culture is incredibly important. It's something that comes top down very often. We want to create a culture that is emergent basically, that is agreed on by the wider slide against my metaphors here. Which comes from the grassroots, and that's what I want to do.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to closing statements, and we'll start with Hamish, please.
Well, thank you everyone who's been here this evening and who's watching on the live stream. I think what we have heard tonight is that there is a really clear choice in these elections. People up and down our borough are fed up of the current Labour Council. They're fed up with the broken promises, the missed targets, the failure on all of these key issues that we've been discussing and debating tonight. They're fed up with phone calls not being answered or repairs requests not being actioned. And it's time, frankly, for a change. I'm really proud of the policies that we are standing on in this election. I'm proud of our plan to make Southwark a better place. We've talked about lots of the policies here tonight, but it's not just about policy. It's about attitude. And it's about the way in which we would want to work, the way we would want to involve the residents of our borough in the council's processes and in the council's decisions. It's a completely different approach, and one which I think has been sorely lacking in Southwark for a long time. So next Thursday, I would urge you all to go and vote and to support your Liberal Democrat candidates in your ward in order to demand better from our borough and from our council.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Claire, please.
Well, yes, thank you all again for coming out, and thank you for the incredibly insightful and interesting questions. I've been as curious as you have, actually, to hear the answers to some of them. I feel like I am echoing the Commissioner slightly, but there is a huge amount of frustration in Southwark, and I believe that we should be getting Greens in the room to take this frustration to the places where the decisions are actually being made.
Thank you. And Kieran, please.
Well, my thanks as well to everyone who's come and to those who've watched all the way through as well. As I said at the beginning, we face a really hard time for our community right now. We have people across the borough who are struggling to put food on the table and to pay their energy bills. And as a Labour Council, we're here to support you and everyone across our borough through that hard time. I don't want to dwell on the negatives, but I think what struck me about the discussion this evening is it's been a discussion where I've had, firstly, one opposition party not even turn up, the Conservatives. No surprise there, they really have abandoned the people of Southwark. And the other two opposition parties having lots of suggestions about things that could be better, but no answers as to how they could be improved. No policies, no manifesto, no real proposals for the people of Southwark. So I urge you to go and read our Labour Party manifesto. You'll find it on our Southwark Labour website. It sets out in about 30 pages or so the real difference we'll make to you, the people of Southwark, if you elect us on the 5th of May. That's more good jobs, making sure we have more apprenticeships, new green jobs, investment in our town centres. That's a greener Southwark. More green spaces, more protected nature spaces, 20,000 more trees, more cycle lanes, more EV charging ports, really getting the investment into our borough to make it a greener place, and halving the council's carbon emissions again over the next 4 years. It's about making our estates and community safer, a £2 million anti-social behaviour task force, investment in our streetlights, investment in our CCTV, and action to tackle misogyny and work with men and women to address that. It's about more homes local people can afford. We're building 2,500 already. We'll start another 1,000 over the next 4 years. And it's about real support for one another. Support with the cost of living, a new cost of living fund, action on food, as well as support for people who are struggling with their mental health. Mental health services for all our young people. It's a national scandal that's not available everywhere. We'll provide it in Southwark. Mental health support for adults and parents too. And support for unpaid carers. And I could carry on. Our manifesto sets out real action across the board for you and why we'll be on your side as a Labour Party. And I urge you to vote for a party that is really thinking about the detail of how we deliver better Southwark, a fairer, greener and safer Southwark for you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to conclude the debate there. I just want to say thank you very much to all of you for coming, and to those of you who are watching. This will be shared with our partners through the different platforms, so it will be available to people. I also want to say thank you very much for allowing the debate to run as smoothly as possible and being
courteous, that's very much appreciated. And thank you to the panelists here, to Kieran, to Hamish, and to Claire. And please do, if you can, donate generously so that we can continue doing this, but also other events which bring people together. And finally, do vote on the 5th of May, but also do, if you can, it's a hard ask, go out and get other people to vote who maybe don't vote, because the local elections are very, very important. They do matter and they do make a difference to people's lives. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great evening. Take care. Thank you.